Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy. I usually talk about sex education on this channel, and that means you should stick around because it's going to be very interesting, I hope. I do hope lockdown is treating you well, that you're feeling like you're kind of used to it now, that you can deal with this for a little while. I'm feeling fine for the moment. I wish I could go and see people, but you know, that's just the way it is, isn't it? But talking about seeing people during lockdown, there has been varying advice depending on what country you are, what government you have, relating to what kind of relationships you can have. There was an article in The Guardian on Friday and in other news outlets as well, reporting on some advice that the Dutch Health Institute had given, which is an arm of the Dutch government. It's the Dutch public health people, right, who issued advice that people should find themselves a sex buddy. Single people, this is. So people who are in a relationship and live together, there's no problem there. Obviously, you're allowed to have sex with that person. It's not recommended if they are showing symptoms of COVID-19, but generally, you know, that's not a problem. The Dutch government are also okay with people seeing each other if you are a long-term partner, even if you don't live together. They're all right with that, it looks like. But there was some interesting advice given to say that people who are single should maybe have some sort of arrangement. They understand that single people might want physical contact, as they were putting it. Although this was translated from Dutch, so don't take this as gospel. But they understand that people want physical contact, want that kind of relationship. So maybe you should find yourself a sex buddy, as they said. What they meant by that was you should find one person and one person only. Don't just keep changing partners, and come to some sort of reasonable arrangement where, you know, you're basically having a fuck buddy, yeah? This could be somebody who you live with, but you're not in a relationship with. This could be somebody down the road, probably not somebody who lives a distance away, yeah? As a British person, I saw this article, I saw a couple of comments on it on Twitter, and I was like, there's no way in hell that Public Health England or Public Health Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland were going to issue this advice. There's a few other things which the Dutch recommended as well, including mutual masturbation either over Skype or distancing within the same room if you are in a relationship with somebody who is currently exhibiting symptoms. You know, you can keep away from them but still have certain things you can do. It was like, there's no... what? I mean, that's brilliant. I love the advice. I really do. But it's never going to come out from the UK public health agencies, is it? It's never going to happen. So I had a look into what the advice was coming out of international public health agencies. And there's not actually much from Public Health England specifically on sex. There is general advice about who you should see. So you shouldn't go and see people who you don't live with. That includes partners that you don't live with. That was the advice. So that kind of goes on to say that you can't meet somebody for sex, even if you are in a long-term relationship. You should only see people from in your own household. And that advice has changed slightly at the moment, in as far as you can see people, but you have to be outside and socially distant, so at least 2 meters apart in somewhere like a park. So obviously there's no license there to have sex in that situation, you wouldn't think. The only thing which came out of anybody's official mouth was don't do hookups, which is the weirdest thing to say anyway, although it must have just been reported like that. Basically, it was a no hookup space. You couldn't meet somebody on Tinder or Bumble or wherever that you meet people for that kind of thing and invite them around to have sex, because it was breaking those social distancing guidelines of not meeting people from outside your own household. Makes sense, all right? But clearly not the same as the Dutch advice, where you might want to find one person where you can be physically intimate with them. It's great advice. So that's Public Health England, the amount of advice that they gave out. But I've got some advice here from the Irish public health people, so the health executive, I think it is. And they say also that you can only be sexually active with someone who you live with who does not have the virus or symptoms of the virus. That is a good point, by the way. You don't necessarily have to be in a relationship with somebody to have sex with them. The advice is that if you're living with them, you're allowed to have sex. It's got nothing to do with if you are in a long-term relationship or not, So a housemate is fine. I think that's the same in the UK advice as well. This also says avoid being sexually active with anyone outside your household, avoid kissing anybody outside your household, and anybody with symptoms, standard, because kissing can easily pass on coronavirus. But interestingly, specific advice about actual hookups. So taking a break from physical face-to-face interactions is worth considering, especially if you usually meet your sex partners online or make a living having sex. That is, of course, aimed at sex workers. Although that sounds a bit odd, it's amazing they had advice for that. That's another thing which we definitely didn't have advice for in the UK. There was no advice to sex workers about what they should do. So again, this is still from the Irish health executive. So masturbation will not spread coronavirus, especially if you wash your hands and any sex toys with soap and water for at least 20 seconds before and after. See, they don't say this specifically, but I think what they mean there is if you are masturbating with a partner or even masturbating your partner, that's the idea. So you wash your hands, and therefore if there's a virus on your hands, it won't spread to genitals and things like that, and therefore not accidentally spread. You can't catch it through your genitals. I'm pretty sure that is the case. But of course it still could be on the surface. So yeah, not bad advice, I suppose, if slightly badly put. However, this is odd. If you do have sex with people outside your household, limit it to as few partners as possible. This is again, you'd never get this from the UK authorities. This is from the Irish authorities. They recognise that people have sex with multiple people. They put it in their advice that if you are having sex with multiple people outside your household, then limit it to as few people as possible, which makes sense, right? Because that means you are less likely to spread coronavirus. If anybody has it, you won't be passing it through your list of partners, right? It's not a problem to have those lists of partners, just think about what you're doing. And they also say about using condoms, dental dams to reduce contact with saliva, feces, etc., which is good advice in general, but also especially interesting considering, of course, saliva is one of those things which can easily pass coronavirus. So that's the point of that. Yeah. And then goes on to say you should wash your hands thoroughly before and after sex, etc. Sensible advice from the Irish health people. And finally, I want to show you some advice from not the French government. There wasn't really any. From a very famous French sex coach. And they said that the French are, how do I explain this? The long short of it, and I'm not judging here, is that when the French went into lockdown the first week, they didn't take any notice of it. They spent all their times in bars, cafes, out in the street, all the rest of it, not social distancing. And according to this French sex coach, that's because, one of the reasons at least, is because there isn't any stigma about cheating on your partner. Most people in France apparently do not think it's a moral obligation to remain faithful to your partner, which is interesting. I didn't know that, and it's an amazing revelation. There is a morality about it being agreed with your partner, but there's no long-standing kind of morality about you being always exclusive, at least for the majority of French people. So again, there's no official advice from the French government, but the advice from this particular person was, again, to limit contact as much as possible with other sexual partners. And it makes sense. In general, there's no problem. Okay? It is only because we're in a global pandemic where this is a problem. If you have many contacts with many different people, that you can pass the virus on. You may not be symptomatic. You don't have to be coughing and sneezing to pass this virus on, unfortunately. But going back to the Dutch, I saw another article today which actually had the advice about having a sex buddy toned down a bit. Not withdrawn, but toned down. The reason why the Dutch government issued this advice in the first place is because there was complaints about there not being any advice for single people. But the other advice that they gave out was brilliant. So they're talking about, and these are the words, they were talking about sex with yourself. So masturbation, right? But it's a great way of phrasing it. Sex isn't necessarily between you and somebody else, or many other people for that matter. It's an act all on its own, which you don't have to have anybody else with you. They were actually recommended people had Skype sex and other ways of having intimacy when you can't be with somebody. And I just find it amazing. And I realise the Dutch are very progressive, and this is typical of them to issue this kind of advice. But it just wouldn't ever happen in the UK. It hasn't happened in the UK in this pandemic. And the day it does, well, I'll be dancing in the street, but I don't think it'll ever happen. I'll link the articles that I found below in the description. I don't know what you think about this. Maybe you are in another country and you've got some advice that your government has issued you. Leave that maybe in the comments below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. You can do that down below as well. Subscribe, because I make videos more or less every single week on sex education topics, and click the bell so that you are notified of when I next upload. And therefore, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.